Imagine taking a quiet morning walk in the park and stumbling upon a young girl passed out on a bench, three tiny children crying beside her, wrapped in nothing but thin cloth. No one knows who they are. No one stops, except one wealthy man. That single moment of kindness sets off a chain of events that changes all their lives forever. This isn't just a story about charity, it's about family, resilience, and love found in the most unexpected place. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support the channel and stay for more heartfelt stories just like this one. At exactly 5:30 a.m., as the first light of morning brushed against the windows of Charleston's historic mansions, Graham Whitaker laced up his running shoes like he did every day. To the world, he was many things: a widowed billionaire, founder of Whitaker Industries, the name behind half the city's infrastructure, a man known more for his solitude than his smile. But to himself, Graham was simply a man surviving the silence. Every morning, he jogged the same path along the oak-lined edges of Riverside Park. It was his ritual, a way to stay grounded, keep breathing, keep moving forward. He never expected anything to break that rhythm. But on that particular morning, just as the mist began to lift from the grass and the air carried the faint perfume of blooming jasmine, Graham saw something that made his steps falter. At first, he thought it was a bundle of clothes on the bench near the old stone fountain. But as he got closer, his breath caught. It wasn't just a bundle, it was a girl, no older than 17, slumped on the bench, her arms limp, her face pale, and her clothes torn and dirt-stained. And beside her, wrapped in thin, fraying blankets, were three babies, crying, trembling, barely moving. Graham froze. He had faced CEOs in billion-dollar mergers. He had delivered eulogies. He had buried the only family he'd ever had, but he had never felt fear like this. The girl, she wasn't breathing right. Her lips were dry, her body too still. One of the babies had a wheezing cough, his tiny chest rising with alarming effort. The other two cried soft, hungry, exhausted cries. No one else was around, not a soul in sight. And in that moment, Graham's heart did something it hadn't done in years. It shattered open. He didn't call anyone. He didn't think. He acted. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around the girl. Then gently he lifted each of the babies into his arms, careful not to startle them, even as they whimpered and clung to his chest. Then with the girl over one shoulder and three infants pressed to him, Graham jogged, fast and breathless, toward his car parked just outside the park gates. People stared. A jogger gasped. A dog barked. A cyclist nearly fell off his bike trying to make sense of the scene. But Graham didn't explain. He didn't stop. He opened the back seat of his black Range Rover, laid the girl across the leather interior, nestled the babies beside her, and pulled out his phone. "Evelyn," he said breathless, when his longtime housekeeper answered. "I need the guest rooms prepared. Clean sheets, soft blankets, heat up formula if we have any, and call Dr. Rosen. Tell him to meet me at the house." "Sir?" Evelyn asked, stunned. "What's—" "I don't have time to explain." He hung up. His hands trembled as he gripped the wheel. He hadn't cried in years, but his vision blurred, because as he glanced in the rearview mirror and saw that girl lying unconscious, arms curled instinctively around those babies, he realized something terrifying and beautiful. This moment was going to change his life. Evelyn Moore had worked for the Whitaker family for over 22 years. She had witnessed Graham fall in love with his college sweetheart, Amelia. She had ironed his tux the night he received Charleston's Philanthropist of the Year award. She had sat beside him after the funeral when Amelia and their unborn daughter were taken from him in a tragic car accident, an event that had turned the grand Whitaker mansion from a place of life into a hollow, echoing shell. Since then, Evelyn had never once heard the sound of a baby in the house, until today. The sound of the front door slamming open made her drop the mug she was drying. Graham's voice echoed through the entryway. "Evelyn, blankets, bottles, now, sit them." She rushed toward him, only to stop dead in her tracks, because what she saw took the air right from her lungs. Graham Whitaker, the most composed, precise man she had ever known, was holding three squirming, crying infants in his arms like a man carrying the whole world. His sweatshirt was wrapped around a frail teenage girl cradled against his chest. Her eyes were closed. Her skin, almost translucent in the morning light, was ghostly pale. "Oh, dear God," Evelyn breathed. Don't just stand there, Graham said gently but firmly. Help me. They moved like clockwork after that. Evelyn prepared the guest suite, the one with the softest mattress in the sunniest window. She laid the girl on the bed, removed the damp clothes, cleaned her with warm cloths, and gently checked her temperature. Meanwhile, Graham sat on the nursery floor, a room he hadn't entered in 10 years, bottle feeding one baby while the others lay swaddled beside him. He didn't know what he was doing, but his hands didn't shake. Her fever's high, Evelyn said as she returned from the girl's room. She's dehydrated, and she's got old bruises on her ribs and arms. Looks like she's been carrying these babies for a long time. Is she their mother? Graham asked. Evelyn paused. I don't think so. She's too young, and something in the way she holds them. It's love, yes, but it's not maternal instinct. It's desperation. Protection. An older sister? He guessed. Maybe. Just then, the doorbell rang. It was Dr. Rosen, their longtime family physician. He took one look at the scene, Graham feeding an infant on the floor, Evelyn cradling another, and said without missing a beat, let's get to work. By late afternoon, the house had changed. The living room floor was covered in clean blankets and formula bottles. The kitchen counter held freshly boiled pacifiers. The guest suite smelled of lavender and warmth. And the girl, still unconscious, now breathed softly, deeply, her skin regaining color. Graham stood in the hallway outside her room. He didn't move. He just watched her. And something stirred in him that he hadn't felt since he held his own daughter's ultrasound in his hands. A future. Not his, hers. Sir? Evelyn said quietly, approaching. He turned. She hesitated, then added, You know what you're doing, don't you? No, Graham said. Not even a little. Evelyn smiled. Then you're already doing better than most. The first thing she felt was warmth, then softness, then the terrifying awareness that she was not on the park bench anymore. Marin jolted upright, her breath caught in her throat. She wasn't in danger, but her body didn't believe that yet. Panic clawed at her ribs. Bree, she gasped. Micah, Juno. She scrambled off the mattress, feet bare against the hardwood floor, heart pounding, limbs shaking. Her eyes darted across the unfamiliar room. Cream curtains, a warm lamp, a pitcher of water and a bowl of soup beside the bed, and near the window, a crib, 3 small bundles, 3 familiar size, 3 tiny chests rising and falling in perfect rhythm. They were safe. They were alive. Marin collapsed beside the crib, her arms curling around all 3 babies at once. Her shoulders trembled as relief overtook her like a flood. It was only then that she noticed the man in the doorway. Tall, salt and pepper hair, a face both stern and soft. He did not speak right away. He simply stood there, watching with something in his expression that surprised her more than anything. It wasn't pity, it wasn't confusion. It was something closer to reverence, like she was a miracle. You're safe, he said softly. Marin backed up instantly, shielding the babies with her body. Don't touch them. I won't. Who are you? She asked, voice shaking. My name is Graham Whitaker, he said. I found you this morning. In the park. You were unconscious. The babies were crying. I brought you here. To my home. Why? Her voice cracked. Because you needed help, he said simply, and no one else was helping. She shook her head. You don't understand. We didn't steal anything. I wasn't. No one said you did. Marin blinked. That wasn't the response she expected. Graham stepped into the room slowly, keeping distance, lowering himself to the armchair near the window. You've been asleep for almost a full day, he said. The babies have eaten, rested. You should too. Marin held Bree tighter. Her lips trembled. We don't need your charity. Graham nodded. Understood. She waited for him to argue, to lecture, to tell her how lucky she was. But he didn't. He just sat there, hands clasped, voice gentle. Would you like some soup? He asked. Evelyn made it, he said. She makes 2 always. Marin didn't answer, but her stomach growled, and when Graham stood, poured a bowl and set it quietly on the side table, then backed away. She picked up the spoon, slowly, carefully, as if it might disappear if she looked away. Her hands trembled with every bite, and every bite made her feel more human again. My name's Marin, she said quietly halfway through the bowl. Graham nodded. Nice to meet you, Marin. These aren't my babies, she added, her voice softer now. They're my siblings, Bree, Micah, and Juno. They're triplets. Graham's brows lifted slightly. You're raising them? She nodded. Our mom died giving birth to them. I was 16. And your father? Left the day after the funeral. Graham said nothing for a moment, his eyes softened. You've been doing this all alone? Marin shrugged as if to say, what choice did I have? I tried to stay in school, she said, but they cried all night. I was always late. I missed too many days. My principal said I had to prioritize. And you chose them. She nodded. They're all I have left. Graham leaned back. He looked at the girl across from him, barely more than a child herself, curled around three infants like a human shield. And he knew there would be no sending her away. You don't have to stay, Marin said suddenly, eyes lowering. You can go. We won't be a burden. We'll leave once they've eaten. You're not a burden. I've heard that before, right before the doors closed on us. Graham inhaled slow and deep. Well, he said gently, these doors won't close. In the silence that followed, Marin's head dipped, and for the first time in months, maybe longer, she slept without fear. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't the lonely silence that had defined it for the past decade. It was a new kind of quiet, filled with soft baby sighs, the rustle of blankets, and the distant sound of a wind chime Graham hadn't noticed in years. He sat alone in the conservatory, a cup of lukewarm tea in his hands, the moonlight casting pale lines across the glass walls. Evelyn walked in, still in her apron, holding a folded baby blanket to her chest. She finally fell asleep, she whispered. All three of them, curled up like puzzle pieces. Graham nodded. She's a strong one, that girl, Evelyn added, taking a seat beside him. He didn't reply at first, just sipped his tea and stared out at the dark garden beyond the glass. Then quietly he said, Do you remember Amelia's laugh? Evelyn looked over, her eyes softening. Like spring water, she said. Light, clear, always too quick to laugh at your jokes. She used to sit right there, Graham said, gesturing toward the sunroom's corner. Pregnant belly, feet in my lap, humming lullabies she hadn't even written yet. Evelyn rested a hand on his arm. She would have made a wonderful mother. She never got the chance, he whispered. A long pause. Then Graham added, Sometimes I think I stopped living the day she died. You didn't, Evelyn said. You just went underground. He smiled sadly, built a bunker with board meetings and press releases. Evelyn chuckled. You forgot how to be human. And now, she looked at him, truly looked. You're remembering. Outside, the wind picked up slightly. A tree branch brushed against the glass. Somewhere in the nursery, a baby murmured in her sleep. And Graham felt something shift in his chest. Not grief, not guilt, but something gentler, like invitation. Do you think she'd approve? He asked softly. Of what? Me bringing a stranger and 3 babies into our home. Evelyn's eyes glistened. I think Amelia would have made them hot cocoa, wrapped them in quilts, and braided Marin's hair before bedtime. Graham laughed quietly, then said, I think she sent them to me. It was the first time he'd said that out loud. And somehow the moment he did, he didn't feel so alone anymore. The smell of something warm and sweet drifted down the hallways of the Whitaker mansion, a scent that hadn't touched its air in years. Marin blinked awake, her cheek pressed against the pillow, the first light of morning curling through the curtains. She instinctively reached out to check on the babies. All 3 were nestled in the crib by the window, asleep, soft breaths fogging the cool morning light. And something else caught her attention, something foreign to her ears, sizzling. Was someone cooking? She tiptoed barefoot down the hall, hugging the oversized sweatshirt Evelyn had laid out for her the night before. As she turned the corner toward the kitchen, she paused, because what she saw didn't fit into any version of reality she knew. Graham Whitaker, billionaire, stoic, polished, stood at the stove in his button-down shirt, sleeves rolled, flipping pancakes like he was auditioning for a diner in the countryside. Good morning, he said without turning around. Marin hovered by the door. You cook? I toast, I microwave, I panic under pressure, he said with a small smile. But pancakes I can do. My wife loved them. There it was again, that gentle sorrow tucked behind his sentences like a bookmark he never removed. She's the one in the photo near the piano, Marin said quietly. He nodded. Her name was Amelia. She used to say Sunday pancakes could solve anything. Grief, headaches, bad grades, cold feet on a wedding day. Marin smiled faintly. Graham plated a stack and gestured to the breakfast nook. Sit. She obeyed, hesitantly at first, like someone who'd never been invited to the table, only told to clear it. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Marin kept one eye on the hallway, ears tuned to the babies. You don't have to hover, Graham said gently. Evelyn's with them. She practically threatened to swaddle me if I interfered. Marin chuckled, but it was tight, guarded. You'll get used to it, he added. To what? To not doing everything alone. Her fork paused midair. I don't know how to do that. I know. She looked at him. This man with his quiet grief, this house full of expensive silence, this stranger who now knew the names of her siblings. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Why keep us here? Graham set down his coffee and answered honestly. Because the moment I saw you in that park, I felt like I was being handed a second chance. Marin blinked. A second chance at what? He looked straight into her eyes. At family. She didn't reply. Because how do you respond when someone hands you the thing you stopped believing in? But she didn't run. She didn't flinch. And when he slid the last pancake onto her plate, golden and imperfect, she whispered, thank you. And for Graham Whitaker, that word meant more than all the business deals he'd ever signed. Because this wasn't gratitude for pancakes. It was the beginning of trust. It had been 9 days. 9 quiet, steady days since Graham had carried Marin and the babies through the mansion's tall doors. In that time, the triplets had gone from wide-eyed and underfed to bright, babbling toddlers with a newfound obsession for Evelyn's shoelaces. And Marin, though still guarded, had begun to breathe in fuller rhythms. She slept without starting at every creak of the floor. She ate her meals warm. She sang lullabies again, softly like a memory brushing against her lips. But she hadn't left the house, not once, until today. You want me to come with you? Marin asked, eyeing the car keys Graham dangled between his fingers. Only if you want to, he said. I'm heading to Bellhaven Books. They've got a cozy corner in a children's section that makes Evelyn tear up. Marin hesitated. I haven't been outside in a long time, not without a stroller and excuses. Graham met her eyes. There's no stroller, no need for excuses. Just you, me, and shelves of forgotten stories. She bit her lip, then nodded. Bellhaven Books was nestled between a flower shop and a bakery, its brick facade covered in ivy. The gold-lettered sign faded by time. A bell above the door jingled as they entered. It smelled like cinnamon, old pages, and quiet. The kind of quiet that welcomes instead of shames. Marin exhaled slowly. I forgot what real quiet felt like, she whispered. Graham smiled. Pick something for you. I'll find something for the babies. As he wandered off, Marin ran her fingers along the spines of hardcovers she couldn't afford just months ago. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from remembering. Remembering who she used to be before survival stole her name. A reader, a dreamer, a girl who believed in beginnings. But not everyone believed in second chances, especially not the 2 women seated near the cafe corner, whispering over chai lattes. That's Graham Whitaker, one of them hissed. With a girl half his age, the other said, raising an eyebrow. Did you see the news? Someone spotted him with 3 babies last week. No wife, no explanation. Scandalous. I thought he was still grieving. Apparently not. They laughed quietly. Marin overheard every word. Her fingers tightened on the spine of the book she was holding. When Graham returned with a stack of board books, he saw it instantly. The shift in her shoulders. The way her eyes stared past him. What happened? Marin shook her head. Nothing. But he knew. He followed her gaze. To the women, to the whispers, to the invisible arrows she'd endured her whole life. Then he looked back at Marin. You're not invisible anymore, he said softly. And some people won't know what to do with that. She swallowed hard. I don't care about them. I do, he said. I care about what they make you feel. She looked up at him, really looked. and saw something behind his eyes that made the sting fade. Not pity, not apology, fierce, quiet loyalty. When they left the store, Graham did something he hadn't done in years. He reached for her hand, not for romance, not for show, but to say, I see you, and I'm not letting go. The rain came softly that evening. Not a storm, just a gentle, steady drizzle that painted silver streaks down the tall windows of the Whitaker home. Inside, the house glowed with golden lamplight. The triplets had just finished dinner, their faces sticky with applesauce and giggles. Evelyn wiped Micah's chin as Juno toddled off with a spoon in each hand like she was preparing for battle. And Bree, quiet little Bree, slipped off her booster seat and padded over to the kitchen counter with a sheet of paper and a purple crayon. No one noticed at first, not until she walked back, holding something in her tiny hands, her eyes searching for someone. Mr. Graham? She asked softly. He looked up from the dish he was drying. Yes, sweetheart. I made you something. She held out the paper. Graham took it gently, careful not to crumple the page. And when he saw what was on it, he forgot how to breathe. The drawing was clumsy, like most toddler art, stick figures with round heads and long arms. There were 4 of them, a tall one with gray hair, a girl with a ponytail, and 2 smaller ones holding hands. Above them, in Bree's crooked handwriting, was a single word, Baba. Graham stared at the word, then back at the picture, then back again. His hand began to tremble. Do you know what that means? Marin asked from behind him. He turned, eyes wide. She's been saying it in her sleep, Marin said gently. It means D in Arabic. Our mother used to sing it in lullabies. Graham looked back at the drawing. The rain tapped gently on the windows like a heartbeat. And he, a man who had not shed a tear in a decade, felt his throat close. I'm not her father, he whispered, voice thick. You're the only one she's ever known, Marin replied. Graham placed the drawing on the fridge, right in the center, using a magnet shaped like a sunflower. Then he leaned against the counter and wept, not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. Evelyn didn't speak. She simply came over and rested her hand on his back. And Marin, she stood by the doorway, watching this man fall apart in the softest way. And in that moment, she understood. Some broken hearts don't shatter, they melt and make room for family. The letter came on a Wednesday, folded in a manila envelope, marked Charleston Department of Child Welfare. Official, cold. Evelyn handed it to Marin in the kitchen. Marin stared at the envelope without opening it. Her hands shook. I'll read it, Graham said gently. She nodded, unable to trust her voice. His eyes scanned the letter in silence. Then he looked up. They're requesting a home visit, he said softly, to evaluate the children's living situation and your legal guardianship. Marin's breath caught. I'm not their legal anything, she whispered. I never filed paperwork. I was 17. No one offered to help. I just took care of them. And you've done a better job than most, Graham replied, his voice calm, but there was steel underneath it now. Marin sat down heavily. They're going to take them, she said. I can feel it. They're going to put them in foster care, separate them, give them to strangers. No, Graham said, rising. They won't. She looked up. How can you be sure? Because I won't let it happen. The next morning, Graham called a meeting with his legal team. They sat in the study, 4 attorneys, pens clicking, tablets blinking. I want to know what it takes to adopt 3 children, Graham said. Legally, permanently, as soon as possible. They blinked at him. Sir, are they biologically related to you? No. Are you married to their guardian? No. Are you certain about this? Graham leaned forward. They are family. That's all that matters. Later that afternoon, he found Marin in the garden, sitting cross-legged with Juno in her lap, and Bree nestled against her shoulder. He sat beside her. I want to adopt them, he said. Marin turned slowly. What? I want to give them my name, my protection, a future, not charity, family. Her lips trembled. But what about me? He looked at her, not through her, not around her, but at her. Then we do it together, he said. If you'll let me, I'll adopt you too. Marin couldn't speak. The world spun around her. The grass, the trees, the warmth of her sisters against her skin, and his voice, steady, kind, real, anchored her. He wasn't saving them. He was joining them. That night, as the baby slept and the stars blinked quietly overhead, Marin stood by the nursery door, watching the three tiny chests rise and fall. Then she whispered into the silence, "You're going to be okay. I promise." And this time, it wasn't just a hope, it was a vow. The courtroom was colder than Marin expected, not in temperature, but in tone. Wooden benches, clean suits, stern faces. Every whisper sounded louder in a room built for judgment. She sat between Graham and Evelyn. Her palms were clammy, her breath short. Across the aisle sat a social worker named Ms. Dalton, clipboard in hand, expression unreadable. She wasn't cruel, just official. And sometimes that was worse. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and the calm of someone who'd seen everything, entered and took her seat. Case 117A, Temporary Custody Review of Minors, Bree, Micah, and Juno Harper. Marin felt her stomach twist. Even hearing their names read aloud made her feel like she was on trial. The hearing began. Reports were reviewed, home visits discussed. Graham's attorneys spoke about the stable household, the resources, the plans for adoption. Then came the questions. "Ms. Harper," the judge said, adjusting her glasses, "you've been caring for your siblings since their birth, correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Marin answered. "And during that time, have you had legal custody?" "No, ma'am. I was 17 when they were born. And since then, I didn't know how. I just kept them safe." The judge nodded slowly. "And do you understand that legally the state has the right to intervene?" Marin's voice shook. "Yes." "And yet you continued." "Yes." "Witaya." Marin looked around the courtroom, at Graham, at Evelyn, at the faces watching, most of them strangers. But one pair of eyes, soft and round, peeked in from the back row. Bree, sitting quietly on Evelyn's lap, holding her favorite bunny. And that's when Marin stood. No paper, no speech, just her heart. "Because they're mine," she said, "not by birth, not by law, but by love. Because when my mom died and our dad left, no one asked me to take care of them. No one told me how. I just did." The courtroom went still. "I fed them when I had no food myself. I held them through fevers and sleepless nights. I missed school. I missed childhood. I missed me. But I didn't miss a single heartbeat of theirs." Her voice cracked. "I've spent the last 3 years terrified that someone would say I'm not enough. That love wasn't enough. That because I didn't file the right forms or say the right things, I didn't deserve to be their sister. Their guardian. Their safe place." She paused, then said softly, "But if being family means showing up, staying when it's hard, choosing someone over and over again, then I am their family, and no system, no title, no courtroom can tell me I'm not." The judge sat in silence for a long, long time. Then she folded her hands. "Ms. Harper," she said, "that was the clearest definition of parenthood I've heard in years." She turned to Graham. "And Mr. Whitaker, you're prepared to proceed with the adoption?" "I am, Your Honor." "For all three children?" "And Marin," Graham said firmly, "if she'll allow me." Gasps stirred in the courtroom. Even Marin turned to him, stunned. The judge blinked. "You're requesting to adopt her as well?" "Yes, as my daughter." There were tears now. Quiet, astonished, hopeful. Bree clapped once, instinctively. The judge smiled, a real smile. "Then pending final evaluations, and with this court's full support, this family will remain together." The gavel came down, and Marin, for the first time in her life, didn't feel like someone who had survived something. She felt like someone who had been chosen. A soft spring breeze danced through the garden, tugging at the petals of the newly planted roses along the walkway. Evelyn was out front, sweeping the porch steps, humming a tune she hadn't dared hum in a decade, the one Amelia used to sing. Inside, Marin helped Micah into his new shoes, while Bree and Juno giggled over cereal mustaches at the kitchen table. And Graham? He stood outside by the front door, watching the handyman polish the final screws into a gleaming new plaque. Solid brass, clean font, 3 simple words. When Marin stepped onto the porch, still brushing crumbs off Bree's sweater, she paused and blinked. because for the first time since she'd walked through that door unconscious and broken, her name was on the house. The Whitaker Harper family residence. She stared at it, frozen. Her heart thudded against her ribs like it was trying to memorize the moment. The name, the meaning, the permanence. She ran her fingers over the cool metal letters. They were real, firm, no longer temporary, not a guest, not a case, not a girl with babies in a borrowed bed. She was home. Graham stepped beside her. I wanted the name to reflect the truth, he said. Marin turned to him, her eyes glassy. And what truth is that? That you weren't just added to this family, he said. You built it. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them. Because some tears are not meant to be hidden. Some tears are declarations. Behind her, the triplets burst onto the porch, arms full of drawings and sidewalk chalk, shouting in overlapping syllables. And Marin turned, arms open wide. They ran into her like gravity, like instinct, like they had been running toward this moment their entire lives. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in watercolor golds, Graham stood on the porch beside Marin, watching the kids play tag through the tulips. He handed her a cup of tea. She smiled and whispered, I didn't think I'd ever get here. He looked at her, quiet for a moment, then answered, You didn't get here, Marin. You brought all of us here. The day was calm, the kind that arrives like a soft exhale after a long season of holding your breath. Marin sat in the living room, a pile of laundry beside her, folding onesies into perfect little squares. The triplets were upstairs with Graham, who was valiantly attempting to read The Very Hungry Caterpillar in 3 different voices. Evelyn entered with a gentle knock on the open door, carrying a small object wrapped in linen. I found this in the back of the hallway drawer, she said. Thought you might like it. Marin raised an eyebrow. What is it? Evelyn handed it to her, smiling. Marin unwrapped it slowly. A wooden picture frame, hand-carved, old, but smooth from years of being touched. Inside it, a photograph. At first, Marin blinked, not understanding what she was looking at. Then it sank in. It was a photo taken just last month, probably by Evelyn herself. The 5 of them were sitting under the big oak in the garden. Graham was on the grass, legs crossed, Juno asleep in his lap. Micah was laughing with Bree, who held a chalk-covered rock in one hand like it was treasure. And Marin, arms around them all, was laughing. Not smiling, laughing. Head tilted back, eyes crinkled, weightless. I don't remember that, Marin whispered. You were in it, Evelyn said gently. But I look like someone who forgot to be afraid, Evelyn finished. Like someone who's finally home. Marin stared at the photo again. She didn't see the girl from the park bench anymore. Didn't see the thin frame or the shadows under her eyes. She saw a mother, a sister, a daughter, a woman. She saw herself. Tears welled up, but they didn't sting. They warmed. I was just trying to keep them alive, Marin said softly. And in doing that, Evelyn replied, you gave them life. You gave all of us life again. Later that evening, Graham came downstairs to find the photo hung on the wall above the fireplace. He paused, smiled, and stood beside it for a long while, because that wasn't just a picture. It was proof of healing, of second chances, of love that had no name at first, but now had a frame. It was late. The house was asleep. Outside, the wind swayed through the trees, brushing against the windows like a lullaby, too old to remember its words. Marin sat on the floor of the upstairs closet, not to hide, but to think. The triplets had fallen asleep early, and Graham had turned in with a book in hand and his reading glasses sliding down his nose. Evelyn had gone to bed humming something that might have been Amazing Grace. And Marin, she just wanted a moment, a quiet one. She was digging through an old storage box Evelyn had pulled from the attic earlier that day, marked Nomvula Personal in faded blue ink. Her mother's name. Her hands trembled as she lifted out a scarf that still smelled faintly of lavender, a cracked jewelry box, and beneath it all, a spiral-bound notebook. She opened it gently. Most pages were recipes, to-do lists, scribbled phone numbers. But halfway through, one page stopped her cold. It was a letter, unfinished, written in soft cursive, titled simply, For Marin. My darling girl, if you're reading this, it means life didn't go as I planned. It means I left too soon, and you had to grow up before I could finish showing you how. But please remember this. Loving you was the best thing I ever did. I see your heart. I see your fire. You were born to protect, born to lead, but also born to love. Don't let the world harden you, Marin. Let it shape you, but never break you. If the road gets heavy, let your tears fall. Let your knees bend. But never your spirit. And when you feel alone, when you feel like you failed, remember this. I trusted you. I believed in you. I still do. Love always. Mama Marin stared at the ink, smudged near the bottom, as if her mother had been interrupted, as if the letter itself had been waiting, years, for her to find it. She cried quietly. Not the tears of loss this time, but of release, of connection, of hearing her mother's voice echo through paper and time, reminding her that she was never really doing this alone. When morning came, Graham found her in the sunroom, still holding the notebook. He didn't ask. He just sat beside her, silent. She leaned into his shoulder. I think I'm ready to write her back, she whispered. He nodded. Then write it. Later that day, Marin opened a new notebook, and on the first page, in neat, careful handwriting, she wrote, Dear Mama, you were right. It was hard. It bent me, but it didn't break me. And somehow love found its way back to us, through kindness, through strangers who became family. You'd like him, by the way, Graham. He's quiet, but warm. He loves the kids like they were his own. Because now, they are. And me, I'm not surviving anymore. I'm living. You gave me strength, Mama. Now I'm giving it to them. Love your daughter, finally at peace. It wasn't a grand affair. There was no cathedral, no live band, no 7-tiered cake, just a garden. 100 rose bushes in full bloom, a stone path that wound its way between rows of oak and magnolia, and a small wooden arch that Evelyn and Bree had decorated with hand-picked flowers and silk ribbon from the attic. Under that arch, on a morning soaked in sunshine and birdsong, Marin Harper stood in a simple white dress, barefoot in the grass. And beside her, in a dark gray suit and no tie, stood Graham Whitaker, the man who had once believed he'd used up every ounce of love he had to give. The man who now couldn't stop smiling. The guests were few. Evelyn sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief that once belonged to Amelia. The triplets, now almost 4, sat cross-legged on a blanket nearby, tossing petals into the air like confetti before the ceremony even began. Micah kept asking when the cake would happen. There was no pastor, no officiant in a robe, just a longtime friend of Graham's, a retired judge named Clarence, who stood with a wide grin and said, Marriage is a contract, sure, but this isn't about paper. This is about proof. He nodded at the couple. That you survived what you didn't think you could. That you forgave what once felt unforgivable. That you opened a door when life tried to slam it shut. Marin looked into Graham's eyes, and without cue cards, without rehearsals, she whispered, I never thought someone would choose me. Not the broken version. Not the girl with too much baggage and 3 tiny souls in her arms. But you didn't just choose me. You stayed. You listened. You let me become. Graham's voice cracked as he answered, I never thought I had anything left to give. But then you showed up, a girl on a park bench, holding the world in her arms. And I realized I wasn't out of love. I just didn't know where to put it until I found you. They didn't exchange rings that day. They exchanged vows written on paper and crumpled by nerves, held in hands that had held too much loss and too many second chances. And when the words were spoken and the breeze applauded gently through the trees, Clarence grinned and said, Well then, what are you waiting for? They kissed, soft, full, steady, and the triplets clapped, laughed, and promptly began demanding cupcakes. That night, the family sat around the fireplace. No gowns, no speeches, just pajamas, marshmallows, and sticky hands. Marin rested her head on Graham's shoulder as Bree curled up in her lap. Micah had fallen asleep mid-sentence on the rug. And Juno whispered, Mama and Bob are married now. Graham looked at Marin, she smiled, and whispered back, We've always been. It was an early autumn morning. The air smelled of damp leaves and distant chimney smoke. The city hadn't quite woken up yet. Marin parked across from the park, slid out of the car in her wool coat, and walked. Each step felt familiar, not the path itself that had long since been repaved, but the feeling, that strange, quiet ache of remembering what it felt like to not belong anywhere. She passed the swing set, the broken fountain, and finally the old bench under the tall sycamore tree. It looked smaller now, worn, weathered, but it was unmistakably the same. She sat down slowly, hands in her lap, eyes closed. For a moment, she didn't see the golden leaves or the morning sun. She saw herself, 3 years ago, thin, exhausted, shivering, with Bree in one arm, Mike on her chest, Juno crying softly at her feet, her arms wrapped around them all, a shield made of pure will. No help, no plan, just a single desperate prayer whispered into the trees, let them live, even if I don't. Marin opened her eyes, the bench creaked gently beneath her, and she whispered, you did it. Not to the sky, not to some imagined force, to her, to the girl who didn't give up, to the version of herself that sat right here and held the weight of a world too heavy for a 17-year-old heart. You got us through. You didn't run. You didn't break. A tear slipped down her cheek. But it wasn't grief. It was gratitude. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded envelope. On the front, it simply said, to the girl who sat here before me. Inside, she'd written no words, because sometimes healing doesn't come with language. It comes with showing up. So she tucked the envelope under the bench's wood slats, right where her back had once pressed when she thought she'd collapse. A quiet offering, a thank you, a goodbye. When she stood up, her shoulders were lighter. The park no longer felt haunted. It felt sacred, a place not of endings, but of beginnings. She walked back to the car where Graham waited, engine running, Juno waving from the back seat with chocolate on her cheeks. You okay? He asked gently. Marin slid into the passenger seat, smiled softly. I think I finally am. And as they drove away, the bench disappeared in the rearview mirror. But the girl who once sat there, she stayed not as a memory, but as a reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is survive. The kitchen was chaos, flour on the floor, sprinkles on the dough, and Marin, standing in the middle, apron stained with batter, hair in a messy bun, smiling wider than she had in days. It was the triplets' 5th birthday, and for the first time, she wasn't buying a cake from the store at the last minute. She was making one, from scratch. Mommy, it's tilted, Micah cried, peering over the counter. It's called rustic, Graham said diplomatically, stepping back with a smirk. Rustic means messy, Bree whispered, hiding a giggle. Marin laughed. Maybe, but it's made with love. Juno clapped her hands. Then it's the best kind. By the time guests arrived, a few neighbors, Evelyn's bridge friends, and even Judge Clarence, the house was glowing. Balloons floated above the dining table. Streamers danced from ceiling fans. And the cake, 2 layers of vanilla and chocolate with faux, slightly uneven frosting, stood proudly in the center. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. When the candles were lit and the song was sung, slightly off-key and wonderfully loud, Marin knelt between the 3 children. Make a wish, she whispered. The kids squeezed their eyes shut, blew with all their might. Flames vanished. Cheers erupted. But then, just as the noise began to die down, Juno leaned close to Marin's ear and whispered, I wished for you to be born too. Marin froze. Slowly, she turned to look at Juno's tiny face glowing with joy. What do you mean, sweetheart? She asked, voice trembling. Juno beamed. Because today is our birthday. We got born 5 years ago, but you became our mommy that day. The room fell quiet. Even the background chatter faded, because sometimes a child's truth pierces deeper than any speech. Marin's lips parted. Her eyes brimmed. And then the tears came, soft, silent, unstoppable. She pulled Juno into her arms. Then Micah, then Bree, and for a long moment they just held each other, surrounded by frosting and family, and the kind of love that doesn't need language. Only presence. Graham stepped forward, a slice of crooked cake on a paper plate. Now you have to eat your own masterpiece, he teased gently. Marin wiped her tears and took the plate. It's a little messy, she said, tasting the first bite. Rustic, Graham corrected, grinning. But perfect, Evelyn added, raising her glass. Everyone laughed. But Marin looked at her children, her husband, her home, and whispered under her breath, "Happy birthday to me." The sun had just peeked over the rooftops of the quiet Charleston neighborhood when Marin stood at the edge of the elementary school's drop-off circle. Her hand clutched the straps of three tiny backpacks, one pink, one green, one navy blue, each embroidered with a name she knew by heart: Bree, Juno, Micah. The triplets were 6 now, and today was their first day of school. They bounced beside her, full of giggles and nerves and the smell of new sneakers. Micah kept retying his shoelaces. Juno had stuffed her lunchbox with emergency stickers. And Bree was quiet, focused, her little fingers holding Marin's sleeve tightly. Graham knelt to fix Juno's backpack strap. "You ready, my brave ones?" Juno nodded hard. "We're gonna learn everything. Even math," Micah added grimly. They laughed, except Marin. She smiled, but her heart was beating unevenly, because for 6 years she had been their world, their teacher, their nurse, their storyteller, their compass. And now the world was about to grow. A bell rang. The front doors opened. Children flooded forward like a wave. A teacher appeared at the sidewalk, waving them in. "It's time," she said gently. Marin knelt and looked at each child in the eye. "You remember where your lunch is?" "Yes, Mommy." "You remember to be kind?" "Yes, Mommy." "And if anything feels scary?" "Ask for help," Bree whispered. Marin kissed each forehead, and just as she stood up, ready to wave goodbye with her brave face on, the three of them turned back. Juno spoke first. "Wait, Mommy." "What is it, baby?" They reached into their pockets, each pulling out a folded piece of paper. Crayons, scribbles, heart stickers, and 3 scrawled sentences. "Dear Mommy, we love you. You're our favorite teacher." Marin's breath caught. The other parents moved past her. Children filed in. The sidewalk cleared, but she stood frozen, clutching 3 love letters written in crayon. 3 proofs that her job was not over. It had simply grown. She waved them off through blurry eyes, and as the triplets disappeared into the building, hand in hand, she whispered, "Go show the world who you are." Then she turned and found Graham waiting behind her with a thermos of coffee. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. She nodded, wiping her cheeks. "I think I just graduated," she smiled. The leaves rustled overhead, golden with early autumn. Marin sat on the old bench, her scarf tucked neatly beneath her chin, her silver-streaked hair caught gently in the breeze. Beside her sat a young girl, maybe 13, sketchbook open in her lap, sneakers kicking softly against the dirt. She was quiet, curious, listening. "And this is where it happened?" the girl asked. Marin nodded. "Right here. It was early, cold. I could barely feel my fingers." She looked out across the park, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I had 3 babies with me, and no idea how I was going to make it through the day." The girl, Juno's daughter, Ellie, frowned. "But you did." Marin chuckled. "I did. Not because I was strong, not because I had a plan. I had neither." She turned and looked into the girl's wide eyes. "I did it because of love, and because a man with a heavy heart and a full wallet decided to stop and ask if I was okay." Ellie sketched a little, then paused. "What would have happened if he didn't stop?" Marin took a deep breath. "Then someone else would have." "Really?" Marin nodded. "I have to believe that, because the world can be cruel, but it also makes room for grace, and sometimes grace wears a suit and drives a Bentley." They sat in silence for a while. Children played in the distance. A dog barked. Somewhere nearby, a mother called out, "Time to go home!" And Marin smiled, because this was home now. Not the mansion, not the title on the mailbox, but the knowing, the living proof that something broken can be mended, that something fragile can grow roots, that love, when chosen again and again, becomes legacy. Ellie looked up. "Grandma?" "Yes, sweet one. When I grow up, I want to help people too." Marin reached out and brushed a leaf from the girl's shoulder. "You already do. Every time you're kind, every time you listen. That's how it starts." As they stood to leave, Marin glanced back at the bench and whispered, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular, just to the space that held her pain once and taught her how to carry it forward with gentleness. The sun was gentle that morning, warming the garden just enough to draw butterflies out from the hedges. Marin stood on the grass in a light linen dress, barefoot, surrounded by voices she loved. There were folding chairs, pitchers of lemonade, and napkins weighed down by mason jars filled with daisies. Someone had placed a chalkboard sign by the fence. It read, "Welcome to the Whitaker-Harper family reunion." Bree arrived first, hand in hand with her wife, both laughing over a spilled cup of tea. Micah came next, taller than anyone remembered, arms wrapped around a toddler who wouldn't stop singing. Juno followed, carrying a diaper bag and a 3-year-old with the curls Marin swore came from her. Evelyn, now nearly 90, sat beneath the oak in a wicker chair, quietly beaming at it all. Graham, silver-haired and gentle-eyed, stood beside the photographer, adjusting his shirt collar one last time. "All right," the photographer called out. "Let's get everyone together." People gathered, children wriggled into place, elders settled in, laughter filled the air like birdsong. Marin stood in the center, hands on the shoulders of those she once carried, eyes meeting the lens, heart full. "Say cheese," the photographer called. But Marin didn't. She whispered something else, just as the shutter clicked. "Thank you." Later that night, when the garden lights had dimmed and the guests had gone home, Marin sat beside Graham on the porch swing. The photo had been printed instantly, a gift from the photographer. In it, she saw all of them, 3 generations, dozens of hearts, and in the middle, a girl who had once fainted on a park bench, now surrounded by a family born not from blood, but from choice. She traced her finger over the image and whispered, "We made it." Graham kissed her temple. "You brought us here." And somewhere in the attic, in a memory box tied with blue ribbon, there still rested a folded envelope that read, "To the girl who sat here before me." It was never opened again, because now she no longer needed to read it. She had lived every word. Ma'am, sometimes life breaks us down to the barest version of who we are, not to punish us, but to show us who we can become. Family isn't who you're born to. It's who stays, who sees you, who holds your hand when the world turns cold. And love is not a promise you make once. It's the choice you make every single day.